Hi everyone, William Ford from Atlanta Music Critic here. This is the season when many public radio stations hold their annual pledge drives. If you listen to classical radio, I encourage you to support stations that still offer locally curated classical programming. One of my favorites is KVNO in Omaha, one of the few full-time classical stations left in the United States. Stations like that deserve our support. I also hope you'll consider supporting Atlanta Music Critic, where I produce independent reviews, interviews, and analytical essays about classical music that you won't find anywhere else. You can support the work at patreon.com/Atlanta Music Critic or by subscribing at wford.substack.com. And of course, liking and subscribing here on YouTube helps more people discover Atlanta Music Critic. Thank you for listening and for supporting classical music.
Well, hey, it's great to meet you.
Likewise.
And appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. To begin with, where were you born?
So I was born in Naples, Italy, which is about 200 miles south of Rome. It's like one of the Italy's biggest city. I would say like not one of the places where people go as kind of like a bad rep in a way, but it's a city full of history. There's like a lot, like it's very important for like opera. Rossini lived there. A lot of like some of Mozart stuff was premiered in Naples. There's the Teatro San Carlo, which is like one of like the architecturally and acoustically one of the preeminent theaters of the era. So yeah, like it's a very artistic city, I would say.
Did you grow up in a family environment that was interested in music, particularly classical music, for example?
Yes and no, meaning that like that my family was very musical, as in like listening to a lot of music. My mom and dad's side of the family, no one was a musician. So I was very interested in music from an early age, but I think it's an experience that is common to a lot of people who like art, but they're not exposed to people making it. For me, it took me a while before I realized like, oh, this is something that I can attempt to do myself. And so I started playing music later in life, around like maybe 13 or 14. Like it felt like something that I could appreciate but not do myself, because I didn't know anyone in my family that was a musician or that played something beyond strumming some songs on the guitar. Like it took me a while before I could get to that
How did you
stage.
start?
My family took a lot of road trips, and back then, like it didn't even have a radio, so like I would have like a Walkman, and I just listened to all these cassettes that like my parent, like a lot of American music, a lot of like Paul Simon, a lot of Jimi Hendrix, a lot of that kind of music, like classic rock. I had a sort of like a falling out in love, and then I got gifted this like Beatles. I don't know if you remember, but like early 2000s, like Beatles, they released that one. It was like a record called One. It was like a collection of their like number one singles. It was like 25 singles. An aunt gave it to me, so like it sat kind of gathering dust for like maybe like a few months, and then one day I was like, oh, like let's just like put it on my CD player, and I was just like, whoa, like it just like, and that kickstarted like a love for music, and I think at that point I had the sort of drive as a teenager, is like, oh, I wanna learn, like I want to be a part of this. I wanted to play saxophone, but I didn't know anyone who played saxophone. And so like the only people that I knew like played guitar, so I didn't know any, like I didn't have access to any teacher. So like I was like, okay, I'm gonna just play guitar, because it's also like a pretty cheap instrument to buy, like the first one. And so that's ended up like playing guitar.
Did you pick up the guitar yourself, train yourself on it, or did somebody help you?
So when I started like my second approach to music, I had this very strong emotional connection, I realized, through it. And so like from the get-go, like I don't know why, but I felt like a calling. It's strange. Like I had a moment. I forget what record I was listening to, but like I was like, I have to be a part, like whatever this is, I have to be a part. Like I cannot live my life just absorbing this. I have to be a part of it. And so pretty early, like I started playing the guitar, and I remember I went to my first guitar lesson, and I said like, hey, I know a lot of kids want to play guitar, but actually like I'm ready to put in the work. And so like from the start, I was practicing like 2, 3, 4 hours a day. Like I was really determined from the start, and that allowed me to sort of like catch up. And so yeah, I was taking classical guitar, and then I realized that I was more interested in like more contemporary music, even though like I'd listened to a lot of classical music growing up, and I liked classical music. What turned me off about guitar is that because it's sort of like an instrument that made it later into like the conservatoire, there's a lot of like etudes, and before you get to start playing like Bach transcription or like the pinnacle of the repertoire, it takes a long time. Whereas you can, for piano, if you're a keyboard player, you can, there's like an amazing selection of like simple but like masterful like compositions. Whereas like with guitar, there's like etudes and etudes and etudes, which are are nice, but like there are no like Bach. Slowly, I made my way to, like, more and more into contemporary music, and then I started like getting interested in jazz, and that's how I decided to come to the United States to study music at Berklee College of Music, because back then when I was in Italy, the conservatory didn't have any like contemporary, or rather they were starting like some contemporary like majors, and so the only way really to study contemporary music at a college level was like to come to the US. So I auditioned, and I was in Boston for 4 years, and then I got offered a scholarship to continue my studies, and so I went to University of Miami to do my master's, and then eventually when I graduated, I was gravitating more towards like East Coast and New York. Most of my friends were in New York, but a lot of like my friends in New York, they were just like doing odd jobs to make ends meet, and I was meeting more and more people in LA that were able to sort of like do jazz, and but like have sort of a commercial, like a career that like allowed more of a, to make a better living. And at that point when I graduated my master's, I was like 27, and I thought to myself, I don't want to get to like have roommates, and like I just, it, to me it was important to like secure, like to build a career at that point. I was also like, my mentor in Miami had offered me to like stay, like to do a doctorate there, but like at that point I was like, I've been in school enough. I'm ready to transition into like a career, and I'm glad that I did, because I really like the setup that I have.
You're in Los Angeles.
I'm in Los Angeles, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to jump back a bit to the Beatles.
Hmm.
When you listen to them, do you remember listening to it as an entire piece of music, or did you recognize chordal structures and other architecture within the song, or did you just like it?
I really loved the cellos in like Eleanor Rigby, and like the harmonies, and like in hindsight I think that I can pinpoint like certain things, because now I have the tools to think back and say I was reacting to like certain things. Like my taste in music comes a lot from like textures. So I also was listening to a lot of Led Zeppelin, and just like the sound of amplifiers, and like in a certain like texture, like the quality of sounds. And I realized that looking back at the music that I like, even though I'm not a drummer, I reacted a lot, like I liked or not liked by like how the sound of the drums were in certain record versus like how it wasn't. Now looking back, I think it was, I was analyzing, and I was reacting to certain specific things. I think it was very visceral. Like I remember the sense of like goosebumps, the sense of like electricity, like flow. I think of, I don't know if you remember the movie Billy Elliot. When he describes that the audition, like electricity flowing through it. Like that's how I felt. I felt like this sense of like goosebumps of like an intense emotional like arousal, if you will, that I was like, I cannot live without this thing.
When you play music, do you get that sense of electricity?
I do and I don't. I get it mostly when I'm writing. I realize that just the way I operate in music, I'm very structural when it comes to music. Like in fact, like I ended up like not becoming a performer, because I don't enjoy performing as much as I enjoy writing. When I perform, sort of like the listener in me is just too activated to like really let go and reach that level of just immersion. And so for me, I like more writing, more sort of like defining things, and then being there to listen. I think like when I arrived in Boston, I realized that I was interested in jazz, and like quite frankly, there were some like kids that were like, I was 22, there were like some people that were like 18 and they could just play, like, you know, so like where I felt like, okay, I'm here and I could either like try to find something that I'm truly excellent at, or like I can spend here 4 years trying to catch up to how these people are playing now. Like I'm by nature tend to be like organized and kind of like system thinking, and that sort of like allowed me to find a way in music that like I hadn't thought about, but it was actually like really fit me kind of like the way I think. So I started writing, and I had some bad experiences getting my music performed. And so I decided that I wanted to put together a cooperative big band that would play my music as well as other people's music. And, you know, that was partially because I felt bad that I couldn't pay people to play my music, but also because I wanted to like learn from other. And so I ended up like conducting that band because, you know, there was like a lot of like rehearsals, and, you know, so I couldn't play guitar because it was just, you know, I was too busy with logistics. I was trying to find like some gigs, some recitals to play. So there was just too much. So I ended up like kind of like more in the conductor role. I ran it for about 3 years, just every Sunday, getting in front of a band and and just sort of curating this band and getting it to sound better, and getting, you know, and understanding how like little tweaks would affect how, like, you know, people would play or interpret the music, and what worked and what didn't work. For those 2 hours we were just like doing it, and it was a perfect spot because I got to be like the listener, like I got to like sort of like tick a, you know, some boxes. And what I do for a job, like, you know, I'm an orchestrator. I mean, I compose, I write too, but like my most of my day to day is orchestrating, which is basically sort of troubleshooting music, and putting it in an orchestral format, and then, you know, going at the session, and getting the players to read it in a certain way, or, you know, fit a certain emotional arc. And yeah, so that was really formative for me, and allowed me to like sort of refine what my calling was and what I liked about music making, if it makes sense.
Got it. Okay. I'm thinking again about your comment about liking texture. Do you add those manipulations after you did the recording or before you're doing the recording?
Yeah, like I tend to do a bit of both. You know, I use guitar a lot, and I record it and I manipulate it. Sometimes like I you know, play it and manipulate it as I record it. Like I really like the sound of guitar, but like one of the issues is when I'm writing music for film, generally like especially electric guitar carries a certain type of like aesthetic. And so like a lot of it is like trying to masquerade the guitar into, you know, and making it into like something that doesn't scream like a certain aesthetic, but is like more part of like an ensemble cast, if you will.
When you're doing movie music, would you say that your role is primarily as an arranger, an orchestrator?
Yes. So when it comes to music, movie music, I am primarily an orchestrator. And the reason why, you know, I chose that path is because personally, in terms of like day-to-day work, I prefer being an artisan on a day-to-day life. Like I can write fast and I can, you know, I can deal with the deadline, but I found that to do creative work, like purely creative work under like constraint, it generates in me a kind of stress that is like has a very long fallout. By the end of it, I'm kind of like depleted in a way that then it doesn't allow me to be there for like my loved ones, and I just and to me like it's not worth it. And I have a lot of fun being an orchestrator. I have a lot of fun. Also, I like hanging out with other musicians. And as an orchestrator, my clients are other musicians. Whereas, like, as a composer, your clients and the people that you're trying to talk to and trying to get work with are like directors and, you know, and writers, and, you know, and I like those people. It allows me to stay in the music world. I went to Boston for jazz, like I studied jazz composition there, and I went to Miami like for this program that is like mostly like about jazz composition and like engineering, like music recording and engineering. So I didn't really have a drive to write music to picture. Like after I came here, I've been involved. I've done additional music, like additional like on TV shows. I have done some shorts. I've done a couple of like feature films. So like I've done it, but it wasn't like my main itch. Like my main itch is like it was more like I want to work with ensembles and you know and get to like record them and get to be a part of the process, you know. as a career, I prefer it. I really, really enjoy being an artisan. The way I like to explain my work to people that are sort of like outside is a composer for film is like a Giorgio Armani or a Valentino or a Louis Vuitton. Like they come up with beautiful designs. Those designs live on paper. Then you need a person who is a tailor who knows that like if that sleeve is made of cotton, well, it has to be a certain type of cotton and it has to have a certain type of slack because then your model it just sort of like how to take that design that is on paper and just sort of translate it so that in the real world it looks stunning. And to me, it gives me great sorts of pride to be able to do that. Like I thrive in this sort of like translating things, just bringing this sort of operational harmony. I love cooking and I like hosting. I love like my favorite part of cooking is hosting. I just love to throw like great party and like being an orchestrator is being hired, throw like a great, great party. Writing music for film is like a grueling business. There's like a ton of revision. Composer, when they get to the recording date, is like the bull at the end of the bullfight. Like they're just tired. And for me to take that and understand where the spark was and just like deliver it and put it in a way that like the music and the idea is celebrated and it sounds the best that it can sound, it sparks joy. Like that is the thing that like professionally like drives me forward.
At the beginning of this process, do you get like a MIDI file from a composer or a sketch? What do you get in order for you to begin your job?
Typically like a MIDI of the samples that are being used with audio of the demo that was approved by the director. And then typically my work varies a lot because I have certain clients that are like very well versed in orchestral writing, and so like their sketches are a bit more fleshed out. Some productions are very troubled. There's like reshoots, re-edits, so like sometimes like, I'll get a sketch and like I just get markers, say like add brass, add wood. Other times, like I work with composers who come more from an electronic music background or a rock background, and then my job is more to flesh out what's there. It's like a variety of things, but
Do
I
you,
would say it's a creative problem solving.
once you've done your work, do you
Mm-hmm.
send it back to the composer to say, yeah, this is good, or how does that work?
Certain composers, they just like they don't want to like have anything to do with it. They're just like, okay, like, well, I'll see you at the stage, and if there's changes, we change them like live. Other composers, they're like more protective and they want to be like involved. I don't have issues with like addressing notes and sending the material back, and I want them to like it's their music and I want them to love every bit of it. I charge what I charge and I work the way I work, and so like if I say like this thing can work better this way, or I tend like to be as diplomatic as I can. My objective is always like to stay as true to the main idea, but like like I respect that certain people are very protective with their music, but for me, like I try to privilege working with clients that see this as a partnership of sorts, or like or tend to like trust me with their work, because ultimately like I am confident that what I'm going to deliver is going to be the best way that it can sound. And also the other thing is like if you're Stravinsky, after writing the first two three Russian ballet, you can get as you can write something as complex as the Rite of Spring, and you get the rehearsal time, and you get and so like and you get like woodwinds with four players but realistically, even like a lavish production, you only have certain amount of players, certain amount of time. Certain like orchestras like work with unions, certain orchestras allow overdubs, certain don't. So my job, it's also one of project managing, where like if I go to the client and say like, hey, this is lovely music, but we would need to get this like 1 minute piece of music recorded, we need like half hour, because and we could rework it so that it sounds exactly the same, but it's perhaps a little bit like easier to play, or we can get the same effect. I am in your camp. I'm trying to sometimes these composers are like they work with the package deal, so they're footing the whatever the orchestra overtime is coming from their package. So like I'm working to make the thing the best that it can be within the budget constraints, and that's why I like a relationship of trust.
When you've got it all orchestrated and
Mhm.
it's about to be recorded,
Yes.
do you attend the recording session?
Yes. For most of the recording sessions, I am very much like a producer where like I run the session and I call cues. Certain composers are like more hands-on. They like to run the show. But I would say most composers try to sit back and more like listen to the music and think, okay, does this work to the picture? They're like troubleshooting in real time. Also, sometimes on bigger budget productions, producers or the director or showrunners are there. So like sometimes the composer is also like busy politicking, if you will. It's my job to like make sure that like everything gets recorded and everything is like is running on time. If there's changes, like ended up communicating it to my team or like, making the changes, making the fixes. Sometimes on productions that are like a little bit more trouble, shall we say, I'll have the director and say like, we'll record the version that was approved, but then the director said like, yeah, this thing, like I wanted more pink, and then you're like, okay, then you say, okay, violas just start from this bar, like where you sort of have to translate things. Sometimes like the composer will be like busy conducting or they're at the very end of this process and they're just like they've hacked through their music so much that they're like it's actually valuable for them to have a tail gunner, if you will, that spots them and can make changes that are like effective and quick. And
Do you ever see your name in the credits?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what
It's
are you called?
if I'm the lead orchestrator of a project, it will be like lead orchestrator. Otherwise, there will be like a lead orchestrator, and then there's like a other orchestrator like listed. But yes, orchestrator, and it's in the music department. Sometimes with television, because the way TV is credited, sometimes, especially like for cable or things that is just like non-streaming, you'll have your on-screen credit on the first episode of the show, and then and then after that, it's like just abridged credits.
I've read that composers like John Williams are much more actual composers all the way through. Is that fair?
I would say film music has changed so much. Like I think that you have somebody like John Williams. He's very much like somebody who like thinks everything basically orchestrally as he's sketching on the piano. So he's part like of a guard of composers that didn't work with samples. Like
Right.
you have a meeting with the director and you say like, hey Johnny, play us the theme, and he would just like sit at the piano and play the
Yeah.
thing, and it was like, oh, we love this. Like there is a lot more revision, there's a lot more like productions are a lot more hands-on because you can do a mock-up of these cues. So like directors like or producers like they listen to the whole score before it's recorded, like in demo form, granted. I would say like just the way the music is written these days, it's because of just the technology. It resembles a lot more kind of like an organization as opposed to the composer in the studio like just writing the score and then like handing it to the copyist. So like that has changed a lot.
Talking about the Bach
Hmm.
transcription,
Hmm.
tell me how you developed that.
I grew up listening to a lot of Bach, and I've been close to like a lot of Bach, like classical music. During the pandemic, I was getting more and more like into synthesizers and like analog synthesizers. And conversely, like I was having really bad anxiety, and to like soothe this anxiety, I was living in a house that was like on a hill, and so like I would take like walking loops around the hill to like just feel better. I would put Bach like the cello suites because it's perfect music to like be in communion with nature, and so like it became a part of like my routine, and just sort of like as I was exploring synthesizer, I was listening to Bach. Like I'm not a cello player, there's guitar transcriptions, but like they're not the same thing. I wanted to do something with it, and then I realized that I found MIDI for it. Like somebody like just made the cello suites into MIDI, and I tempo mapped Yo-Yo Ma's performance of the cello suite. So like basically I put it into like Logic, which is a program like a digital audio workstation, and basically dragged like Yo-Yo Ma's performance into like tempo maps so that the MIDI would play kind of like with the same ebb and flow of his performance. I just like would listen to it, and like along with his performance, the MIDI would go to my like Moog synthesizer, and I would just tweak the filter following, kind of like as a way to like be a part of the performance. And then I started getting ideas for counterpoints to it. Like I don't know if you noticed, but there's like different ideas, and so I started writing little counterpoints part of it. I also like part of the MIDI, and then that I was like, I'd like to record this and make it a performance.